Today is a very exciting day, at least the day that I'm recording this is an exciting day. Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. It may be a couple days before you see this because, well, it's already pretty late at night, so it's definitely not getting out today. I want to try to get it out tomorrow, but we'll see if it ends up happening. But today, Dollywood finally announced their 2026 attraction that I have been speculating about since, well, pretty much since Big Bear Mountain opened, because pretty much immediately after that, we kind of knew there was going to be another indoor attraction behind it. And we even got a little bit of, there's a little smidgen of information at Smoky Mountain Coaster Fest, the ACE event, American Coaster Enthusiast event in 2023. So we were already speculating all the way back then. It feels so good. Here we are, 3 years on from Big Bear Mountain's opening, 2 years on from that event. And finally, we have all the details for NightFlight Expedition, Dollywood's new for 2026 attraction. And man, is this gonna be a good one. Dollywood was my home park for many years. Of all the parks I've been to, it's still probably the park I'm most intimately familiar with. It has a very special place in my heart. So even though I have moved away, here I am on my couch in my still sparsely decorated living room. I've been busy, okay? Leave me alone. Literally over 650 miles away from Dollywood, I sit here to talk about this attraction because I am still very excited for this. And of course, I covered construction of this attraction from when they broke ground on it back in January all the way to when I moved in like mid-June. So you can check out those construction updates if you'd like. The most recent time I talked about this was actually after I moved here as well. I talked a bit about some of the latest teasers that had been going on. And even since then, more information had come out about the ride, but I didn't get around to making a video. And now we have the official announcement. So we're going to talk about that now. So this video is going to be very unscripted. Very much I'm just going to like run through all the information we have and kind of talk through it in real time, give my initial reactions, thoughts, a little bit of analysis here. Maybe down the line, if y'all are interested, I'll do more structured analysis videos about specific things about the ride. But here I just kind of wanted to get my initial thoughts out there. Very much just a conversational reactionary video here. So let's go through it. The name of the ride is NightFlight Expedition. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a fan of this name. And this is coming from someone that strongly defended Big Bear Mountain. I don't know if you remember when Big Bear Mountain was announced, a lot of people were not a fan of that name. It grew on people over time, which I suspect is what will happen here too. But I was an adamant defender of the name Big Bear Mountain. I thought it was a great name. NightFlight Expedition, I don't feel the same way. I understand why some people like that name, but it feels a little goofy to me. I don't know. I'm just not a fan of the name. So I got my computer in my lap so I can go through all this information and talk about it. The last time that Dollywood announced a major new attraction like this was Big Bear Mountain, that announcement back in 2022. And actually the day that that announcement aired, I was with my good friend Nathan driving up to Kings Island, and we actually like kind of watched it in the car on the way up to Kings Island. I listened to it because I was driving. That was pretty cool. And then we kind of like stopped at McDonald's to get breakfast. It was raining, and I remember that was when I watched it on the phone while we were stopped at like a random McDonald's in a gas station in Kentucky on our way to Kings Island. Great times. I haven't hung out with Nathan in a while. He's been busy doing med school and getting married and all sorts of crazy life stuff. And then of course for this announcement, I was at work. So just you know, just sitting in an office. Very, very drastic change from the last big Dollywood announcement that we had. Both of us in a very different place in life than we were back when that happened, which is, I don't know, it's kind of fun just to think about that though. Anyways, you probably saw several other YouTube channels were able to get their thoughts out on this attraction pretty immediately. But like I said, you know, I was at work today, so I didn't. Yeah, it's just the way it is. I have a full-time job, obviously, so I don't have the flexibility that some of the bigger channels have to cover some of this stuff right away. I gotta do it when I have time, you know. But here we are, let's go. So what exactly is NightFlight Expedition, you might be asking? Well, NightFlight Expedition is a new story-based indoor dark ride type attraction at Dollywood using the Mack Rides Rocking Boat ride system, which is I think is definitely going to provide a ride experience unlike anything that really anybody who's ridden this is going to have experienced before. I absolutely love Mack Rides. They're currently one of my favorite ride manufacturers. I love their multi-launch coasters, Copperhead Strike, Helix, Stardust Racers. Those are really the only ones I've done, but they're all fantastic. And I just think Mack's really been on a roll lately with really cool, kind of innovative stuff in a lot of their ride systems. And this is one that's particularly like just crazy out of the box thinking. Basically what this ride system is you have a boat, but you also have a chassis that's attached to a track, kind of like Mack and Intamin's old water coasters, but also not like that at all, because the chassis actually stays attached to the track the entire time. Even during the water sections, there's actually a track underwater that the chassis is connected to. And I still don't understand fully mechanically how this works, so I'm gonna have to look into it a bit more. But basically the chassis and the boat are connected in such a way that when you're actually on the water sections, the boat's actually able to free float and just be basically tugged along by the chassis underneath. So when you go into those water sections, the boat is going to be actually floating. If there's ripples in the water, you'll feel the ripples in the water, just like you were on a log flume or another water attraction like that, or the trough sections of a traditional water coaster. But what makes this different than a traditional water coaster is that even in the water sections, because that chassis is still attached to the track underneath, the track is lined with, I believe, induction motors that are able to pretty precisely control the movement of the vehicles in both the water sections and the coaster sections, because sometimes it will be able to come out of the water on the track and then just be propelled by those induction motors along the track, and even do some gravity-based coaster sections. If you're interested in what this all looks like, look up Mission Bermudas at Futuroscope in France. I think I said all that correct. That opened this year, and that is the first installation of the Mack Rides Rocker Boat in the world. So this was still very much a prototype when Dollywood went to first check it out and probably first purchased it. You know, the Mission Bermudas wasn't open yet, so they're still calling this a first of its kind attraction because Mission Bermudas is outdoors. So this will be the first time we see this ride system used in an enclosed dark ride indoor setting like this. So it's gonna be a completely different take on what this ride system is capable of, which is really interesting. But if you go watch a video of Mission Bermudas, you'll see just how versatile this ride system is. Again, you have pretty precise control of the boat even while it's in the water. So even though it feels like it's floating, I guess it'll probably feel kind of like a motorboat. Like it'll feel like it's actually driving. It'll be able to go to very specific locations in the water, go forward and backwards. You can see where it's actually able to climb out of the water at several spots. The Futuroscope installation has an elevator lift hill and does have a traditional like roller coaster drop on it as well, but it is unpowered, and even like a switch track or two. Yeah, this ride system is capable of a lot, but we don't exactly know which features are going to be implemented into NightFlight Expedition yet. The full track layout of the ride is a secret and will remain a secret until the ride opens. Since it is a story-based dark ride experience, they did put a pretty big emphasis on wanting as much to remain a mystery as possible until guests are able to ride it next year. And I'm gonna really try to avoid spoilers until I get to ride it myself. We'll see how successful I am at that. I'm gonna get my Dr. Pepper here. Cheers. So that's a very basic cursory overview of the ride system here. It's a powered coaster that floats in the water, but then can also do normal gravity coaster sections as well, and has pretty precise control over where exactly the vehicles are moving during dark ride sections. So yeah, just a very interesting, almost kind of hard to explain ride system, which is why I like this so much. I find it so fascinating, rides like, and especially the way the system will be implemented in the ride at Dollywood. As much as I am a roller coaster enthusiast, I'm also a huge just overall theme park fan. I'm becoming more and more interested in like the theme park side of things, and I just absolutely love when you see rides like this that are really breaking the traditional molds, and instead of focusing on, you know, being a new roller coaster or being a new dark ride in the way that we would traditionally define those differences between attractions. Instead, this is focused more on, all right, this is the kind of ride experience that we want to offer our guests, and we're going to use unique technologies in order to achieve that. And at the end of the day, you're sitting here like, is this a water ride? Is this a roller coaster? Is this a dark ride? Like, it doesn't really fit in any of those categories necessarily, because it does things from all of those categories. And it's like, yeah, that's really cool, because it doesn't matter. It's a ride experience. It's really cool. When you have to sit there and be like, how would I classify this ride? That's when I think you've made something really interesting, because now it's not about fitting in a specific mold of a ride anymore. It's about being its own thing and just offering a great ride experience, you know? Regardless, there is the debate over whether the Mack Rides Rocker Boat counts as a roller coaster or not, for the sake of counting credits as enthusiasts do. I do it too, it's goofy, but I enjoy it. Roller Coaster Database and I believe Log Ride and a lot of other places do not count the Rocking Boat as a roller coaster, but the overwhelming sentiment I'm seeing online in the wake of this announcement is most people seem to agree that it is a roller coaster. I am in the camp that I would count this as a coaster. For this specific installation, I might have to wait and see when it's actually installed. My line of reasoning is that it runs on roller coaster track. Yes, it is powered for a good bit of it, but at least the installation at Futuroscope does have that one gravity powered drop on the coaster track, and that, in my opinion, makes it a coaster in the same way that Blazing Fury is mostly a dark ride but has a few drops at the end, so it counts as a coaster. That's my personal opinion, and I do find it really strange and even a little bit hypocritical, if that's the right word, that like RCDB, Roller Coaster Database, they count powered coasters and they count water coasters. If they count both of those, then I think they should definitely count this. I can maybe understand that while it's in the water, it's acting as a water ride, but that's really no different than water coasters. It is able to get up on coaster track and act as both a powered coaster and, as I just mentioned, do normal gravity powered coaster things. So I think absolutely, if power coasters, and especially if water coasters, count as coasters, I think there's absolutely no reason that this should not count as a coaster. But I've already been talking too long about this, because at the end of the day, it doesn't freaking matter. If you think it's a coaster, you think it's a coaster. If you don't, you don't. It doesn't change the ride, so let's move on. When you go to the ride's website, one of the first things you're going to see is the actual ride vehicle that you will be traveling in. And this is the other thing that I'm just not 100% sold on. Yeah, I don't love the name for the ride, but that's whatever. You'll get used to it in time. Like, Top Thrill 2 is a stupid name for a ride, but we're all used to it by now. We will get used to the name. This ride vehicle is just, I can see what they were going for. This ride definitely seems to be leaning into the more fantasy elements of Wildwood Grove, at least compared to something like Big Bear Mountain. Some of the initial Wildwood Grove attractions were very like abstract fairy tale, children's story kind of theme. There actually wasn't much theme to the original attractions in Wildwood Grove at all. Most of the theming was just the land itself, and all the rides within it. Even Dragonflyer, the coaster it opened with, had basically no theming whatsoever. Then you have Big Bear Mountain come along, and that, interestingly, kind of ignores most of the fantasy elements of Wildwood Grove and most of the magic elements of Wildwood Grove. It ignores all that and goes for a much more realistic, we're taking off-road SUVs out of our base camp out into the woods to search for this like Bigfoot style Big Bear character. So that was just, I think it works really well in the Wildwood Grove area, but thematically it is kind of breaks from the fantasy and magic part of Wildwood Grove, and this is leaning back into the fantasy and magic part, which makes sense when you phrase it that way, but then it does kind of just make Big Bear Mountain stick out in that way. But so kind of part of the story of the attraction, from what I understand, is that this family has got some cool inventor types, and they've invented this vehicle that will allow them to explore and search for the hidden lake, which I'll talk about the story a little bit more in just a second. That is the next thing I'm going to talk about. Just wanted to talk about the vehicles first, since we're talking about the ride system. So they've invented this vehicle so that no obstacles can stand in their way. So it's a vehicle that can drive on land, can fly, and float in the water. Literally all terrains vehicle, which is pretty cool. Instead of being more sci-fi grounded, this is of course more magic fantasy grounded. So you can definitely tell with the aesthetic there, it goes more towards the fantasy inventor aesthetic rather than the sci-fi inventor aesthetic, if you kind of know what I mean. So I get what they were going for there, and we'll see how the final product is. I just feel like it doesn't look like, you look at Big Bear Mountain's trains and how intricately detailed those trains are, and this just looks from these images to not have the same level of detail and care put into the design that like Big Bear Mountain's trains did, and that's a little bit disappointing to me. Like, there's just not as much going on there. The kind of fans are kind of cool, the headlights are kind of cool. I'm sure it'll have some cool texturing on it, but it's not like every surface was thought about the way that front and back cars of Big Bear were. But maybe this is not the final design. Maybe once we see it in person, there's going to be a lot more detail on it. That's possible. But yeah, I think that's really the only thing other than the name that kind of strikes me as like, I'm not a huge on the look of the vehicles, but we can move on to the stuff that matters now. I guess I didn't adequately mention that's what happens when I don't have a script and I'm just going off the top of my head here. Location-wise, this ride is going in the very back of Wildwood Grove, which is the newest area of the park they've been building out over the last couple years. So it's going behind Big Bear Mountain in that area. Pretty simple. You'll kind of see what the location looks like if you watch some of my construction updates of the building frame going up, but yeah, it's literally just right back there as the phase 3 of Wildwood Grove. So the main marketing thing that Dollywood's really touting for this ride is that it's 4 adventures in one ride. And what they mean by that is they're going to be taking advantage of the incredibly unique characteristics of the innovative Mack Rides Rocking Boat system to do basically 4 things that would be individual ride types on their own, but they're gonna do all 4 of them in one ride here. I'm not sure if this is the order that you'll go when you're actually on the ride, but they say that the 4 experiences are flight, so this is an aerial vehicle. You will be flying at some point. Plunging into what they call a whitewater rapids section. That'll be pretty cool. Climbing a mountainside, which I guess will be your more traditional coaster section. This is probably going to be very similar to this soaring section. At least I think they're both going to work in about the same way, but they're going to be presented differently. Then of course you have navigating the mysterious lake. So that's different from the plunging section, because the plunging section is going to be more high speed in rapid water, whereas I assume navigating the mysterious lake is going to be maybe still water and the boat's just being pushed along by the induction motors on the track beneath. So 4 different ride experiences packed into one ride, basically, again, due to the versatility of this really cool ride system. Before we go further then, we need to talk about the story for this attraction. So we don't know much about this, and I think that's a good thing. I know personally I want to be surprised by as much of this as possible when I see it in person, but it's still good to know a general synopsis. So, from what I understand, watching the recording of the original presentation and then rewatching the trailer a couple times, it seems like you will be joining a family, specifically a brother-sister pair, who, much like Ned Oakley, has been searching for the Bigfoot-style big bear for his entire life. This family, and this specifically the sibling pair, has been searching the mysterious hidden lake for a very long time. This was teased a lot in the teasers. They pull out books that were like the hidden lake. So I was like, yeah, the finale of the ride is probably going to be a reveal of some very visually impressive lake, and that seems to be what it is. So basically, we're going to be searching for this lake. And unlike Big Bear, I think we're actually going to find this one. The whole ride's going to take place at night and have a huge emphasis on bioluminescence, which I think is kind of an excuse for them to make some really cool, whimsical, magical, beautiful set pieces. And I'm really interested to see where they go with that. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think it was very smart for them to set the ride at night, because that also allows it to be as dark in the building as they want, which means when you go to like the soaring section where you're flying, they could maybe make it dark enough where you can't see the track very well, and then you'd more feel like you were actually flying. Different stuff like that. So overall, I think it was a very smart move for them to set the story of the ride at night. We don't know much about the sequencing of the ride in the story at this point. The only thing I can say with a decent amount of certainty is that almost certainly the navigating the mysterious lake will be the final section of the ride. I think that's going to be the climactic finale. I think the mysterious lake room is probably going to be the most visually impressive room on the ride, if you will. As for the other 3, it's possible that you do those in the sequence that they are presented. It's also possible that they're out of sequence, like maybe you climb the mountain and then you, like, once you get to the top, you take off and fly, and then you plunge into the rapids, and then the rapids lead you into the lake. That could be it. Or they could be combining different parts of those in sequence, like you could fly and then land, do the rapids, and then take off and fly again, and then land and climb, and then do rapids again, then do lake. Like, they didn't necessarily say that we're doing each of these just once. Do keep in mind though, with the size of the building, it is a very large building, but you are still space limited with an indoor attraction like this. So if I had to guess, you're just gonna do each of these once. But who knows? Who knows? So yeah, that's part of what makes this so exciting, is that we don't have a POV. We're not going to get a full POV. We're not going to know exactly what's going on in that building until we go to ride it. And that's actually pretty exciting. I'm going to try really hard not to have anything spoiled. We'll see. In terms of the building itself, yeah, it's a big building. I kept saying that. A lot of people see the videos or pictures online and they're like, oh, that's pretty small. And I even thought that when I first saw pictures, but then I went and actually saw the building in person. And when you see it in person from the trade and stuff, then you'll see, like, that is a big building. And based on the setup of this ride system, I do think it's probably going to be 2 stories in the building. I can't say for sure, obviously. I don't want to get people's hopes up, get anybody too excited. But I do think they're going to have the building divided into 2 stories. That whole climbing the mountainside probably takes you from floor 1, where you board, to floor 2. I imagine some stuff happens on floor 2. Maybe there's a more traditional coaster drop. We actually see a more traditional, looks like either a coaster drop or a log flume type drop in the trailer. So that'll probably take you from the top story back down to the bottom story through the whitewater rapids section. I assume all the water sections will probably be on the first floor if they do a 2-story approach. Just for ease of engineering and making sure nothing goes wrong, you want all the water to be on the first floor if you can help it. So I imagine you'll plunge back into the whitewater on the first floor and then have the climactic finale in the lake on the first floor. If they do that 2-story approach, which I feel like they will need to do, because even though the building's pretty big, they're touting this being a 5.5-minute experience, which is great. I love it. Finally a really decent length ride at Dollywood. Yeah, if they're gonna squeeze 5.5 minutes out of that building, I think it'll probably need to be 2 stories. Also keep in mind, like we mentioned, this ride is capable, we know, of an elevator lift system, which could help save space if they do a 2-story approach. They're also really putting focus on the fact that this is a weather-independent facility, as they describe it. So it's going to be completely climate-controlled, air-conditioned in the summer, heated in the winter. And the fact they keep saying weather-independent tells me it's almost certainly grounded, so the ride will probably be able to run in thunderstorms, which is all very nice, especially with Dollywood wanting to extend their season so long. I have been to Dollywood several times in the winter where it gets way too cold and everything closes except Blazing Fury, and then it just feels kind of weird. So having a flagship industry-defining attraction like this that's able to operate even when it gets too cold during Smoky Mountain Christmas, even when it's thunderstorming during those, pop-up thunderstorms in the summer, I think that's going to be really a really great asset for Dollywood to have. So I'm very glad they went for a fully indoor, weather-independent facility here. Then the bottom of the website does list a few extra facts. So the total track length of the ride is 1,255 feet. They say nearly a quarter of a mile, but that's still pretty short. Big Bear Mountain's track length is about 3,900, almost 4,000 feet. So it's a little more than a third of Big Bear Mountain's track length for reference. Kind of makes sense. It all has to be compact and fit into that building, but that does mean we're going to have a lot of very slow moving kind of dark ride moments, and maybe even some moments where the vehicle stops to do some interesting things. And that does go along with the fact that it has a 5.5-minute ride duration, which interestingly it does say including loading and unloading, which makes me think that this will maybe have a moving load-unload station, which would be really cool if it did. I'm not sure why else you would phrase it like that. If it did not have a moving load-unload station, it would be very hard to predict the load-unload time duration. So the way it's phrased definitely makes me think moving load-unload station makes perfect sense for an attraction like this. I really hope that is the case, especially since it is only 10 passengers per vehicle, which is the next thing on this bullet list. You'll want to keep those boats moving in order to maintain good capacity on the ride. Maximum speed of 29 miles per hour. I assume that's just your top speed on wherever the drop is, whether it is a coaster track drop or a log flume type drop. Whatever that looks like, we can see from the trailer there's going to be some kind of drop at some point. And so I assume that's where the 29 miles per hour is going to be achieved, which I've seen complaints online, people saying that sounds slow. But most water rides are pretty slow. Being on a vehicle like this in an enclosed dark ride environment space like that, I think 29 miles per hour is going to feel plenty fast. We'll see. But I think everyone complaining that's too slow is going to be eating their words when they actually ride. Nearly 3 stories high at highest track elevation. That's kind of meaningless. I mean, everybody defines story completely differently, so that doesn't really mean anything to me. But minimum height requirement of 39 inches, that's good. I don't actually know what some of the other height requirements of Dollywood are. Big Bear Mountain's required height is 39 inches, so I assume Fire Chaser is as well. If I can find it real quick. Yep, so Fire Chaser also 39-inch minimum height. So yeah, this will be same minimum height as the park's family coasters, so it still should be plenty accessible to younger guests. And let's talk a little bit more, and let's dig a little bit more to a few more little fast facts that aren't on the website here, because my friend Jason from Coasters and Things sent me a kind of fact sheet that he was sent by some of his friends, I believe, that work at the park, if I'm not mistaken. The pamphlet does give some story information on the inside, but I'm going to focus on kind of the tech spec on the outside right now. So first interesting thing I see here is that on the website they say that it is a 160,000 square foot facility. On this pamphlet they say it is a 44,000 square foot facility. The part I find most interesting about this fact sheet that I was sent was, of course we know it's Mack Rides, 10 passengers per vehicle. The website says that. What the website does not say is that there will be 11 vehicles, they call them cars, but there will be 11 cars on this attraction. Why is that important? Because now we can figure out the capacity. All right, so getting out my calculator on my computer, we know the ride is 5.5 minutes, including loading and unloading. So assuming that they're using a moving load-unload station so that the time of each load-unload cycle is consistent, and the boats are consistently spaced. Then 5.5 minutes, that is times 60, that is 330 seconds. So we know if they're running at full capacity, all 11 boats, then we can divide by 11, and that is 30 seconds per dispatch. So theoretically, if this ride's operating at full capacity with all 11 boats, a boat will leave the station every 30 seconds. Decent enough. So now we can look at 3,600 seconds in an hour, divided by 30 seconds, 120 boats per hour. So if we multiply 120 by the 10 passengers on each boat, the maximum capacity this ride will operate at will be 1,200 riders per hour, which is similar to some of Dollywood's high capacity roller coasters like Wild Eagle or Tennessee Tornado or even Thunderhead, all operate around the 1,200 riders per hour range typically. And it is a huge step above Dollywood's other family coasters, where Big Bear Mountain is capable of usually around 900 riders per hour, but from what I hear, it usually hits more around 800 riders per hour. And then Fire Chaser is capable of about 700 riders per hour if it's running all 3 trains, and it usually runs just 2. So Fire Chaser is probably getting more like 400 or 500 riders an hour if I had to guess. So this is a huge improvement, like probably getting over double Fire Chaser's capacity most of the time, significantly above Big Bear Mountains as well, and right around the capacity of Dollywood's other major coasters that usually don't have long lines. I think it's a good time to point out a lot of the reason that Tornado, Eagle, and Thunderhead usually don't have long lines is because they have the highest capacities in the park for coasters there. So yeah, 1,200 riders per hour, that's pretty good. It's still not like those 3-train B&Ms at the Cedar Fair, Six Flags parks that are hitting usually around 1,600 to 1,800 rider per hour theoretical capacities, but for Dollywood, this is pretty dang good. So I'm happy with that. This pamphlet also mentions some of the technical features of the ride in terms of how it's going to portray the story. So we do have both onboard and offboard audio, which I think is very good. So you have the onboard audio there, probably giving you a whole musical backing track to the whole thing, and having those, onboard audio announcements like you'd have on Big Bear Mountain. But I think it's very important with all sorts of different kind of rides. If you want to make an actual thematic experience, onboard audio is great, but that only goes so far, because if you want to try to convince me that something is over there or over there, it's going to be hard to convince me of that with a speaker that's in my vehicle. So while the speaker in the vehicle is nice for background music, for certain sound effects, having offboard audio is important too. So, if there's like something in the bush over there, I want it to sound like it's actually coming from the bush over there. And that sounds like what they're going to be doing here, which is great. They also mention in 2 bullet points immersive multimedia projections and special lighting effects and projections. So they do not mention anything about like animatronics. So just to not get your hopes up, I would not expect any animatronics on this ride or anything like that. I think most of your dynamic elements are going to be portrayed mostly through multimedia screens, which is kind of what I would have guessed. It maybe is a little bit disappointing for people that were hoping for a more traditional dark ride experience maybe, but I think there's still going to be a ton of physical sets on this ride. Like it does mention right under it, special lighting effects. And by that, I'm sure it means, you will have physical sets and they will be using lights and perhaps even projection mapping on certain things that are actual physical sets, but there probably are going to be a lot of screens as well. There's one point in the trailer where you're coming up to seemingly the top of the mountain, and you can see lots of practical sets around you for rock work and trees and stuff, but then there's what appears to be a big multimedia screen to portray the edge of the cliff. So that all makes sense. If it's done tastefully, I think it'll be really nice. We'll see how it turns out. I have faith in them to churn out a really nice product here. I'm not concerned about it being all screens. I think there's going to be a really nice number of physical sets as well. Just don't expect moving physical sets, I would say. A little bit more on the story. The siblings searching for this hidden lake are Cora and Jasper. So those are the characters that you'll be interacting with. They're actually the niece and nephew of Ned Oakley, who's the guy from Big Bear Mountain, so that's kind of fun. They operate the Hidden Hollow Aviation Company, so that's what was on some of the teasers we saw. They have invented the bioluminator, a device to detect and amplify natural bioluminescence. So, like I said, that's going to have a very big place in this ride. That's part of the reason they're setting it at night, and I think that's just so that they can do some really cool, really impressive lighting effects to go along with those physical sets. So that's gonna be really cool to see. Man, this is gonna be beautiful. And of course, they're searching for Secret Lake, which is in capitals. That's the official name of the lake, apparently, is Secret Lake. It is cool, they give it a little bit of lore here. Apparently Secret Lake is the magical water source that provides Wildwood Grove's wildwood tree with its colorful glowing canopy. This lake, this secret hidden lake underground somewhere, is the source of the magic in Wildwood Grove, and we're gonna find it. We're gonna find it, because that's definitely the finale for this ride. We're gonna actually find it. One last thing, on the website here, there is a really cool piece of art that they put up that shows like a new artistic rendition of Wildwood Grove here. You can see Timber Canyon and Wilderness Pass, the two other areas of the park that kind of border Wildwood Grove. If you've been to Dollywood before, this will look very familiar, the path layout of Wildwood Grove here. You'll see some existing attractions like Blackbird Trail, Dragonflyer, and Big Bear Mountain. Then in the very back, you'll see NightFlight Expedition. And I think it's interesting the facade that they chose here. This like vine covered rock where you can see the bioluminescence inside of the cave there. Part of me hopes that that's kind of what the outside facade of the ride looks like, but part of me thinks it won't look like that at all, because all the other things that are on this map, with the exception of Blackbird Trail, that's actually accurate. But obviously Big Bear Mountain doesn't look like that. So, oh, I didn't even notice at first, like there's an acorn around where Treetop Tower is. There's a little boat where, I keep wanting to call it Sycamore Swing because it was announced as Sycamore Swing, the Great Tree Swing. There's a bird over by Mad Mockingbird. So yeah, even the unlabeled attractions have the things there. But anyways, in terms of the exterior facade of this attraction, I hope they do something themed and it's not obvious it's a big building. The obvious thing to do, since it is Hidden Hollow Aviation Company still, is just to make it look like a big aircraft hangar. That requires minimal effort spent on the outside. And honestly, I'm okay with that if that means they can spend more budget doing things on the inside. If they have to cut things out from the inside to allocate budget to theme the outside, then I'd rather them just go for an aircraft hangar. But it would be really cool if they were able to theme the outside to look like something like that in this artwork here, where it's some kind of beautiful facade that beckons you in. But something tells me it'll probably just be aircraft hangar, because that, again, cheap, requires minimal effort, still themed, I guess, and then they can spend more money on the inside. I would say one of my main concerns for the ride at this point doesn't really have much to do with the ride itself. It's more the location. Like I mentioned, this is in the very back of Wildwood Grove, and if you've been to Dollywood and you've walked through Wildwood Grove, you know it is really a hike to get back there, even just to Big Bear Mountain, and this is going even behind that. Like, if you're going to ride Big Bear Mountain, that's what you're going to do. You're not just going to stumble across it, right? You have to go back there with the intention to ride Big Bear Mountain. And I think that's something that really hurt some of the popularity of Big Bear Mountain. It's still a very popular attraction, don't get me wrong, but I mean, on most of my visits to Dollywood this year and last year, a lot of times that was one of the shorter lines I waited in. Granted, the crews are really great with keeping a high throughput on that ride, but still, I don't think it gets nearly the crowds that I initially expected it to, and I think a lot of that is just because of its location. People are not stumbling across it. You have to kind of know to go look at it, and that's even with Big Bear Mountain wrapping around to the front part of Wildwood Grove, where people can see it pretty immediately and be like, oh, what's that? We should go find it. This ride won't have that going for it. If you're going to ride NightFlight Expedition, you're going to ride NightFlight Expedition. That's the only reason you're going to go back there. You're not going to stumble across this ride. It's really in a location where you would have to be intentionally going for it, which hopefully the ride ends up being popular enough that people kind of know and people kind of go for it, hopefully. But that is a concern I have, is that for the park guests that are not doing all their research beforehand, I'm concerned that people might miss this just because of its location way back there. Regardless, I've been saying for a very long time that Dollywood's really needed another indoor attraction in the park, especially if they want to expand their operating season like they've been doing. And with the type of park that Dollywood is, I've been clamoring that they needed another like super well themed indoor dark ride type experience. So I'm so happy that they are getting this. And the fact that it is such a unique ride and that nothing has ever been done quite like this before, I think was absolutely a great move. I do still find the indoor water ride thing to be a little bit weird, but rides like Pirates of the Caribbean are incredibly popular and people don't think much about that. So yeah, that shouldn't really be an issue at all. It just seemed a little weird to me when we first heard this might be a rocking boat. But yeah, I think doing something that has literally never been done like this before, even at like a Disney or Universal park, I think is very smart, because people are going to come to Dollywood to experience NightFlight Expedition here, and when they do, they're going to experience things that they've never even experienced at a Disney and Universal park in terms of the kind of immersive experience this will offer. Obviously, it's not going to be on the thematic level of some of Disney and Universal's dark rides, just because of the budgetary difference there, but the uniqueness of this ride system is going to do things that are going to make even some of Disney and Universal's dark rides look like child's play. Like, I'm not trying to be dramatic or overhype, but yeah, I think this is absolutely the right move to go with something this unique that's really going to stick in people's heads. It's really going to be like, man, you have to come to Dollywood, because this is the only place where you can experience a ride like this. So I'm really excited to ride this. Again, I don't live anywhere near Dollywood anymore, but I am intending to visit next year for the opening of NightFlight Expedition here. Because like I said, while I am a huge roller coaster fan, second to roller coaster is very, very close. The gap's continuing to narrow. I love a good dark ride, and I love theme parks and themed experiences. So this ride is just absolutely perfect for me. And of course, it's at my old home park, so I gotta go check it out. We don't have an official opening day yet. They've just said that this ride's going to open in 2026. It seems like Dollywood has targeted around Mother's Day weekend for most of their new attraction openings over the last couple of years. So I would assume for this, expect around Mother's Day weekend as well, but it's possible it could be even pushed back past that. I'm not exactly sure what the current construction situation looks like, but with a well-themed indoor attraction like this, with so many different technical components going on, it is not something you can slap together as fast as like Big Bear Mountain or something. So I don't think there's any way that this will be ready for opening day. I will eat my words if it is, and I'll be happy if it is. But I think this is almost certainly not going to be ready for opening day next year. Again, I think probably they'll be targeting around Mother's Day weekend, and it's very possible that delays can occur since we're dealing with much more complicated construction here than Dollywood's typically used to. Regardless, I am waiting to book my trip until we know for sure when it's opening, but as soon as we have an opening date, then I will be booking a trip to head back to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and to ride NightFlight Expedition. I do want to try to ride it as early on in its life as possible so that I can experience it spoiler-free before it inevitably gets spoiled for me online. Because even with like Epic Universe, I tried to go into that spoiler-free and I still had several spoilers. And I went like 2 weeks after that park opened, and I still had several things spoiled. So I'm gonna try to get to NightFlight Expedition opening weekend if I can, just to try to ride it before all the spoilers come out. That's about it. There won't be any construction updates from me, sadly, just because I don't live there. I can't do the construction updates, but I will hopefully be there when the ride opens, and I'm excited. So hope you enjoyed this unstructured video of me just rambling out my thoughts. I'm sure I forgot several things, but I really just wanted to take this opportunity to, again, just kind of ramble, get my thoughts out there. And yeah, if you want to see more videos on this attraction, let me know. I can definitely do more structured videos once I've thought and processed all of this a little bit more. Just wanted to get some of my initial impressions and reactions out of the way here and tell you a little bit about this attraction and why I think it's going to be so awesome and an absolute win for the park. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts and see more of my experiences at theme parks, amusement parks all over the country and the globe, be sure to subscribe to Coasting the Planet. And yeah, hope to catch a ride with you again very soon.